Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. This week, it's Pokemon Legends Arceus. It has a lot of stuff I hate dealing with in games, but for some strange reason, I am hooked. I typically hate crafting, but here, it's simplified enough that I don't mind. I hate open world, and while this isn't, it has a lot of big, meaty areas for you to explore, so it is adjacent. Yet, objectives are clearly laid out, traversal is easy, and there's a ton to do, no empty stretches. So I can dig it. So, what do? You catch Pokemon, you fight Pokemon, you stalk Pokemon, you collect materials, you fill out a map. Going back to the Pokemon, you can really play this game as fast or slow as you want. You can try and run up and just snag a Pokemon or challenge them to a fight. Or you can sneak along behind them, trying to catch them unaware and maybe even from a blind spot. Not only that, but the Pokédex also works a lot different. Rather than the decks of old, where you catch one and you're done, it's scanning the Pokemon and making up some bullshit factoid. Instead, you need to continue to level up an entry by doing things like catching multiple, defeating them, watching them perform certain moves, and etc., like you would if you were actually researching something. It is both a lot of fun, giving you more and more things to work towards, and yet maddening as you try to keep track of it all. There's also a lot more to raising Pokemon. If they learn a move, it gets added to a pool and you can swap them out for what your 4 options are. You can also master moves to use Agile, which lets you go again sooner, or Strong Style, which will slow you down but hit harder. Not only that, but the move tutor is super robust. When I took my Lopunny to her, she could teach her not only some basic things that I could get normally through TMs, which this does replace, but also some that were previously egg moves, like the elemental punches. Getting to that point, I can pretty much assemble my team however I want because these options just let me set up who I'm using to fit the situation. Lopunny alone can cover normal, steel, fighting, electric, ice, and fire, and there might be some stuff I haven't yet gotten just to pad that out some more. I love this system. I'm actually struggling to try to figure out whether I prefer this to the mainline games, though I'm kinda leaning yes. Speaking of those though, that does bring up one problem that I'm personally having, and that's that a lot of things just don't work the same. Pokemon don't have abilities. Status effects work differently. Some moves are completely changed. I'm definitely getting the hang of it, but if you're a long-term player, just don't go into this thinking that you know all there is to know. Besides that, the story is interesting. I watched most of the trailers, and yet the game immediately went in a direction I wasn't expecting. And there are several bits that were not things that I thought I would ever see in a Pokemon game. All that said, the game isn't perfect. I'll get into the nitty-gritty once I've cleared it, and I'll have a full rundown then. The tutorial elements in particular come to mind. That said, I do absolutely adore this game and it'll probably be one of my top 3 in the Pokemon series. I've been streaming it a lot. I was gonna do another one on Saturday, but my thumbnail guy was busy, I was running late on this episode, and the game was destroying my sleep schedule, so I held off. I did still spend a lot of time that day on the game though, just not on any plot stuff. I'll be continuing to hammer it out most evenings till it's done, so please consider checking out Victory Tricksters if you want to hang out for the ride at all. At the rate I'm going, I should have it cleared by the end of next week, and I'll be keeping the clip shows coming, so look forward to that. I also just kinda want to talk about the hype and reception to this game. The scores have been ranging from 8 to 10, most of them being on the higher end. I've only seen one video pop up naysaying it. It's had an incredible word of mouth and everyone is streaming it, so this is huge. When I went to the local GameStop to pick up my copy, at midnight no less, they said about how they had 160 pre-orders at that location, which is crazy because I didn't even know there were that many people living in our town, much less Switch owners. Much less Pokemon fans. This has been a huge opportunity for the series, and it seems like they're actually going to stick the landing. I've probably already mentioned previously that with the way the past 2 titles have gone, Sword and Shield being pretty cruddy in my opinion, and the Gen 4 remakes, while fun, also seeming kind of low effort, this title really needed to impress me, otherwise I was probably done with Pokemon for a while. I don't think I'm the only one with that sentiment. While I half expected to dislike the game due to just not liking the sort of title it was, I plan to be objective and judge whether it was good, not whether I personally enjoyed it, so imagine my happiness when it not only amazed but completely sucked me in. Look forward to a full, glowing review with minimal nitpicks and maybe even some speculation next week. But on just the basic recommendation front, yes, absolutely play this. And I also finished Danganronpa, another episode, Ultra Despair Girls, though I didn't have time to fit it in last week's episode. And be warned, even in discussing the game's basic premise, there are spoilers. If you haven't played through the first Danganronpa but are planning to, I'd say skip this review for now. So, for those of you sticking around, this title takes place between the first and second games. It stars Komaru Naegi, the sister of the original game's protagonist. It seems she was locked up in an apartment for over a year, all her needs being met but a captive all the same, to be used as leverage against him if the need arise. All that changes when one morning a Monokuma bursts through her hitherto locked door and attempts to murder her. After receiving some help from a group called Future Foundation, she manages to escape, but finds that the entire town has been overrun by more cartoon bear robots, and people are dying right and left. Soon she's captured by the game's main antagonist, 5 children who want to wipe out all adults, and she's released back into the town to be a special target in their killing game, and thus we get to the main gameplay. To defend herself, Komaru has a megaphone-like hacking gun that she can use on the Monokuma. When you get to the first main area, it has only 2 functions: break to do damage, and move to activate devices. As you go along though, you get more abilities, such as a knockback shot or a detect function that can find hidden messages and the like. While move and detect can be used as much as you like, your other abilities all require ammo, so you do have to be careful not to have a hair trigger and aim carefully. Luckily, Komaru isn't alone. She's joined by Toko from the first game. Most of the time, she just tags along behind you, but if she zaps herself with the taser, she can bring out her alternate personality, Genocide Jack. This persona is invincible, and rather than needing to aim, she can just slice into enemies using her scissors. The drawback here is that this form is limited by the batteries in her taser, and if you use her too long, you run out and need to find more power. Leaving her out too long also tanks your score at the end of the chapter. She can also rescue Komaru from some lethal attacks by expending a battery, and while you can still do this even without power, the window becomes extremely tight, so I wouldn't count on it. Another gameplay aspect are these strange arcade sections. Hitting the cabinet with the move function will give you an overview of the next room with all its enemies. With it, you need to plot out a path, figuring out how you can manipulate and maneuver the Monokuma to get them into a position to be taken out all in one shot. If you flub it, you're in for a fight. If you do it correctly though, it'll increase your end of chapter score and give you better rewards. The main gameplay isn't bad. There are a few places where you can get overwhelmed, but typically it's not too bad and has a slower pace than most shooters. Though whether this is a good or bad thing really depends on your experience in the genre. Playing as Genocide Jack is pretty much hack and slash, and she feels a little weird to play, but it's workable. And I at least really like the arcade puzzles. It's a nice diversion, and while a few are pretty obtuse and can be a little finicky, making it so that you can figure it out and still fail, most are the nice level of clever that you can figure out if you think about it a little and leave you feeling clever as well as a result when you clear them. The regular enemies are all Monokuma, though there's a good variety of them. You start off with just the basic ones, waddling in your direction and slashing, then you get some that wear helmets and chuck bombs, and then some come with riot shields, and so on and so forth. Each have unique abilities and behaviors, and there are just enough for the game's length that things never really get stale. They also never retire any of the enemies, not even the early game ones, so that you're constantly dealing with new combinations and having to figure out how to prioritize your targets, and whether any of them can be used against one another. And all of them share the same weakness of the glowing red eye, that function pretty much like headshots, so like I said before, careful aim is key, even when the numbers are overwhelming. There are also bosses at the end of each chapter, a remote-controlled robot that looks like a cross between a Metabot and a Gundam. It's the observe, learn their patterns, figure out how to expose their weak spot, and then unload sort of affair. They're a fun change of pace. If you're like me, they'll always look overwhelming in their intro cutscene, but be very manageable when the fight gets underway. Now for collectibles. There are a lot. I thought it was pretty meticulous looking for everything, but I probably only found slightly more than half of them, which drives me slightly crazy. You can buy bling bullets to equip and power up your gun's abilities, along with scissor upgrades at shops. You can find skills that you can equip to power up Komaru, and you can equip more and more of these at a time as you fight through the game and level up. You can find books scattered around to get extra conversations with Komaru and Toko. You can find wanted posters to learn more about the characters and their families from the first game. There's just supplemental information. And there are hidden caricatures of the bad guys you can find each chapter to get points towards your grade. I probably even forgot some stuff. It's quite overwhelming, and you'd have to have not only some crazy OCD to look for them all, but also some supreme observational skills to pick them out without a walkthrough. Honestly, it makes for a really weird pacing in the game when you're stopping to look around every nook and cranny. Beyond that, there are also basic power-ups, such as ammo refills, batteries, money, and health that are dropped by bad guys, or by shooting roulette machines with move, though each of those can only be used once. Now for some odds and ends. The music is fun. Many old tracks are back, but there's some new ones sprinkled in as well, making for a nice OST. I especially like the track for the main menu and some areas of town. I can't really place the genre, but it feels somehow sassy? The graphics are a little odd. The style suits Monokuma, no doubt about that, but the human characters, who before were only various stills, look kind of off in 3D. I guess the visuals just didn't translate. The game also has a few extras. Upon beating the game, you can use any excess money from your adventure to unlock art and music for the gallery. While there's a part of me that thinks these should have just been unlocked after credits, I guess it gives more utility for in-game money, since I think you could easily run out of uses for it midway through a second playthrough. There's also a side story that you can read, which is a nice little bonus. Now I'm going to talk about story, and while I'm not going to get too specific, I am going to touch on some things, so if this is on your playlist, I would probably recommend skipping ahead. The game's got the same charm as other entries in the series, having fun characters with a lot of personality, almost cartoonishly so, contrasted by the very dark and depressing story. I really like Komaru, who starts out as generic female anime protagonist and ends up being a pretty strong character, all her own after she goes through everything. I also like Toko, which I thought would never happen. She's keeping her serial killer in check and actively weaponizing her to help others. She also shows a lot of growth from the last game, which might not have been showcased enough, as well as some here. Best of all is just watching the relationship between the two characters starting out as strangers and kinda just traveling together due to circumstances, eventually becoming friends. I really like them as a duo. The antagonists are also interesting. You kinda get the impression early on that they have their reasons, no matter how warped. I was able to guess most of their backstories, only it always turned out several times worse than what I imagined. I'm just going to consider it a good thing that I was able to suss out child abuse, but wasn't twisted enough to take it to the levels the game did. It led to a weird dynamic where, while unforgivable things were done to them, they clearly had taken things too far, and at times you did still have to question who the bad guys really were. A lot of people, turns out. It was an interesting experience that at times made me uncomfortable. The final boss was really cool. I also had to question whether you'd want to play this before or after the second title, since while I guess it doesn't spoil anything directly, it does kind of give you some info that should make you raise your eyebrow and make some twist in that game much easier to guess. So, my experience with the game. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but I did play through it on the easy mode equivalent. I started on normal with mouse and keyboard, used up all my ammo in the first area, and then reset it on easy. I soon got a PS4 controller working, and after that it was smooth sailing. The main difference for this mode seems to be unlimited use of Genocide Jack, who I rarely use, so I might have been able to get through it without dropping difficulty. Of course, if there was anything else, such as better drops or more or weaker enemies, my being able to clear it would have been debatable. So this was still probably for the best, but I still will wonder. I did manage to get all A's except for one B, so this could have very well carried me, but I don't know enough to say for sure. Regardless, I am glad I played the game for myself rather than just watched a playthrough or a compilation of cutscenes. Overall, I had a lot more fun with this game than I thought I would. While not my typical genre, it was doable enough that I didn't get frustrated once I switched to controller, and the story and characters were fun, if sometimes disturbing, to interact with. It does bring up a question that I don't fully have the answer to, though, and that's if you need to play this game to understand the series. I still need to watch the anime, but I hear some characters from this turn up, so I'm gonna say I think so. I'll let you know once I get through the rest of it, but if you're trying to experience the games for yourself, I would heavily recommend going through this one after you play the second title. So yeah, that's this week. I'll be continuing to play Arceus, and by my own rules, if I manage to clear it in less than a week, it doesn't get added onto the backlog. That puts me at 117 at the moment. Hopefully I can knock it down some more before either Kirby or Splatoon come out, but for now, thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you in the next episode.